Okay, nice landscape shot. So let's head into develop and see what we would do. Now, my immediate thought for this image is that it's a big panorama shot, but it's a bit dark straight out of camera. But what you've done, I think, is beautifully kind of exposed kind of to the right. So I suspect what you did when you took this shot was tried very carefully not to blow the highlights, knowing that you could then rescue the shadows. And that's exactly the right way to kind of take a shot like this. That's a high contrast shot. If you're only going to take one image, is expose for the brightest area of the picture. You know, if you've got a camera that shows you the histogram while you're taking the shot, then, you know, let the histogram push pretty much to the right hand side. You've probably got another stop or two stops to play with there, actually, on the exposure, based on that histogram. But you know, you've been very careful not to blow these clouds out, which are the brightest area, because you can always get a lot more information back from a raw file in the dark shadow areas of a shot. It's much more difficult to get texture back when you've blown the brighter areas. And it's to do with the way a digital file actually stores information. There's much more information stored in the dark end of a file than there is in the bright end of a file, which is why it's easier to rescue shadows than it is to rescue highlights. So I would normally go straight into crop, but it's so dark that I just want to bring out a little bit of the shadow just to see what we're playing with here. So I'm just going to just bring the shadows out a little bit like this, and just push the exposure as well, and just watching the histogram as I do, just so that we don't go too far on any of those highlights. So just like that, so straight away with those two sliders, we can now see what we're playing with. Okay. Okay, well, I don't think there's much going on of interest in this top half of the sky. The bottom foreground is okay, but again, there's nothing particularly interesting. To me, this is crying out for a big panoramic crop. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go to the crop tool, which is, the shortcut is R for the crop tool. And then, I mean, probably try a 3x1, something like that, which is a very cinematic crop. And so immediately it gives you the widest 3x1 crop it can. And then you can play with different things. Now, I know you've got that reflection of that rock there and that foreground water, but I don't know whether that water is really adding a whole lot. I might start there. Now, we don't have to stay with 3x1. We can open the crop up, so we can see whether, you know, putting in a little bit more of the detail of the foreground here, that might balance things up a little bit. But then this becomes quite a bright area, and it's going to pull the eye away from the middle. Whereas if we go with that, it's a cleaner image, because we've not got that distraction of the water coming in down there. I'm going to play with that for now, and let's see what we go. That's the nice thing about Lightroom. It's non-destructive, so we can always come back and try something different. Okay. Now, still quite a dark foreground, but we don't want, if we go any further up with exposure, we're just going to blow out the sky. So we really don't want to do that. Okay, so let's just pull that sky back so that we're happy with the tones in the sky itself. Okay, but we still need to bring out the foreground, and we've already pushed shadows a fair bit. You know, we can do quite a bit there. But I think another way that we can maybe try this is to use, rather than just use the shadows, use a graduated filter. And what we're going to do with the graduated filter, normally you'd start at the top and you'd pull a graduated filter down. But you can also, so just let me hit delete and get rid of that one. You can also start at the bottom of a photo and pull a graduated filter up. Okay, So in this case, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull that graduated filter up. And now, let's just zeroize all those things. Yeah, we can just pull up the exposure, and it's only going to pull up the exposure, yeah, on the area where the graduated filter is applied. So you see, it's not really affecting the sky. We're just, if you like, constraining our exposure adjustment now to mainly this area, and then with a feather off into this area. And if we want to constrain it even more, we can use the range mask and go to luminance and just say, well, just ignore the very those brighter areas. And you see, as I pull the luminance mask down from the right, you see in the top half of the filter, these brighter areas just here and here. As I move that right hand line in, it stops those being brightened by that graduated filter, the application of the brightness. So you see, if we kind of pull that back to there, we can now even raise the foreground even more, and it's not affecting those brighter areas at the top at all. And we can play with how high that graduated filter goes, and maybe just pull it down a little bit more like this. Okay, so we're really just applying that brightening to the darkest areas. We're going to have to do a little bit more brightening up here, but that would be perhaps about right. And it's maybe too bright, so we'll just maybe do it to there, something like that. We can still play with shadows as well now, but it's almost going to be too much. And now we've got to start thinking about layers and where we want to take the eye in the shot. So let's just say okay for that filter now, and just see what we're playing with. So the same depth of field all the way through the shot. If I hit I to bring up the information about this shot, you can cycle through the information. So F11, so we've got depth of field all the way through the shot. So where do we want the eye to rest in this image? You know, an image is supposed to be, you know, a story. You're supposed to take the eye on some kind of a journey, and it should rest somewhere. Now, to me, probably the natural resting place from this image would be this peak here. And if that's the case, we've got to be very careful, because at the moment, this foreground rock here and these rocks here are the brightest kind of areas of the bottom 2/3 of the picture. So the eye is actually going to be pulled to here and not to here. So what we might do now that we've actually got the information, you know, the light into the front of this picture, is we might just use, say, a radial filter and just darken back down that rock there. So again, just maybe pull that down, just to take the eye, you know, stop the eye dwelling on that. And again, if I just right click on the center of that radial filter and duplicate it, so now I've got the radial filters twice, it's sitting one on top of the other. I can just drag the top one and just pop it over there as well, so that you see that bit of rock just there. I just want to darken that and maybe just pull it over so that is all a bit darker in that very foreground region, because I don't want the eye sitting in this foreground area. And we could even do the same. Click on that front one, right click, duplicate, and then take that and just, you know, apply it over here. Maybe rotate it and make that just a little bit bigger, and just darken off those stones just a little bit. And then maybe just bring this mountain in the middle up a tad. So again, you could do this with the adjustment brush, or you could do it with a radial filter. I just find radial filters are just so easy for this kind of stuff. So maybe just bring it out a little bit. Now, that mountain's a lot further away. And if we want to bring all this detail out, I reckon dehaze is going to give us a little bit of A little, yeah, so it's going to darken that off a little bit and kind of give us a little bit more contrast. If we use the texture slider, you see what the texture slider is going to do to that mat. It's really going to bring out that high frequency detail of the tiny details of the rocks and the grass and all the rest of it. So that is probably what we need to do here. Daniel, I'm on a talk.
Can you please fix the TV because we finished the
Right. Okay. All right. 1 second. So that I think is okay. If we wanted to extend that out in terms of the texture, yeah, we're so far back. I think we're out of focus slightly with that bit of rock there. So let's just keep the texture on the mountain where we want the eyes to go. So I think that would probably be about right. Now, overall clarity. If we use the clarity slider, if we go to the left, it would soften things off. If we pull this to the right, it's really going to kind of crunch up the foreground. But again, I don't want to crunch up the clouds. You see what happens if we go all the way? I mean, we get this very dramatic foreground, but we also get very crunchy clouds. So again, you got to be very careful using clarity on the whole picture. So what I might do is go back to that graduated filter that we had originally. Okay, so all I did to find that again was go up to the graduated filter tool and then just look for that dot and just click on it. And now I've selected that graduated filter again, so you can see where it's applying. So as well as the exposure adjustment, I'm going to now add clarity, but just to the area that's covered by the graduated filter. You see, and now that's adding all that lovely mid-tone contrast here and giving us a bit more crunch in that image. Okay, and we can just maybe just lift it a little bit, something like that. Okay, so that would do, and then I might just, I don't know, it's a little bit dark for me there. Let's just take the adjustment brush, and so when I'm painting with an adjustment brush, very often I'll just put the exposure all the way up and just paint, so I can see. Now it's hardly doing anything, so I suspect my flow is down. Yeah, down there, flow is down at 30%. Let's put that up to 100. And I'm going to leave auto mask on because that will cause it to find the edge of the mountain. So now, as I draw with the circle, the inner circle, it will find anything that is the same color as what's underneath the cross in the middle, but it will stop when it comes to a hard edge. So if I draw now, if I make it just a little bit smaller, as I draw now, you see the edge is stopping at the top of the mountain. So it's applying the brightening to the areas around the middle of the circle that are the same color as under the cross, but it's also recognizing the hard edge at the top of the mountain. Now, obviously that's crazy overdone, but now I've decided where I wanted to brighten. Now I can come back and just pull back that exposure. Okay, so we can take it back to where it was at 0, and now just bring it up enough to just bring it into, and maybe put again a little bit of texture. Dehaze, don't know. The dehaze is going to darken it even more. Maybe not the text, just the texture. Yeah, so the texture gives us the detail. Look at the detail it's pulling out there. And just that extra, 0.2 of a stop is just bringing out a little bit more of the detail there. So I don't know. I mean, we could go down to HSL and color and play a little bit with the sky. So maybe, you know, if we go to say luminance, click on this little tool here, find the blue there and just drag down, and you can then play with the brightness or the darkness of the sky. So I might just bring that down just a little bit. That just sets off those white poppy clouds just that little bit more. And is this on my screen or is this a spot? No, it's on my screen. So now just zoom in and just check for sensor spots, because at f11, if you know, that's quite a wide depth of field. If you've got any sensor spots, they're going to come up in the sky, and you want to find them now rather than later on. But that is looking pretty good. There's a few dust spots on my screen, but they're not on the computer. So I reckon that's pretty much what I would do with that image. So we'll just close that down. There we are. So that's the image. So that's the before, and I'm using the backslash key to take me to the before shot. And if I press the backslash key again, that's the after, before and after. Yeah. So yeah, there's quite a difference there, isn't there, between that and that. So let's go back to G for grid, put us back into there, and let's see what Sue did with hers. So this is Sue's shot over here, or it might be Tim's, I'm not sure. And then N for survey mode, and Shift and Tab to just close the two tabs down. Okay, so mine is the one on the top, and Sue and Tim, yours is the one on the bottom. Do you want to talk to this, Sue or Tim?
Yeah, Joe, that's mine. I do like what you've done with it, but it's an old photo, so didn't know that much about photography. But it's great.
And this is it. Isn't it great to be able to go back when you've shot raw and
yeah.
play again? Yeah.
No, I do like how much text you put in. I sent it to you before your previous session where you taught us a lot about texture. So texture's now become quite a favorite. Little back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
but I mean, I like what you've done. You've taken a different tack. I mean, you've kept the water, but
yeah, I just flipped it because they keep on telling us
the
leading line kind of thing. So I flipped the photo so the water was coming from the right, or from the left.
From the left into the right. Taking the eye in. Yeah.
But I like the texture in yours. I really need to put more texture, especially into the mountains at the back. You know, there's not enough detail up there in mine. Whereas yours looks quite brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. But I mean, I like what you did here. I mean, I didn't see that water as a leading line like you did. But I think the way you processed it, you've brightened the water up there in the front, which really has, you know, and you've got that. It's almost a triangle, isn't it? You've got that taking us into the shot. So that works really well. But yeah, I agree that you've just got to play with that new texture slider because it adds so much to stone and fur and feathers. So go back and reprocess old shots that have got that stuff in them because you'll find some winners in there.
Definitely will.
Yeah. But that's a lovely image, isn't it? It's super.
Can I just ask you something? What does chromatic aberration mean?
Okay, chromatic aberrations are color fringing, typically around high contrast edges, which are introduced. It's a kind of function of the digital capture of color. So you'll very often get purple or greeny fringing. Very often, if you've got things like tree branches with high contrast with the sky behind them or whatever, if you zoom right in, you'll sometimes see a little purpley or greeny fringe.
Okay.
And it's very easy to get rid of in Lightroom. In the develop module, now this isn't a chromatic aberration shot.
No,
I don't.
There was something else that was mentioned on for us, and it was like, well, we don't know what we're looking for.
Right. Well, I'll show you then. So if we go into D for develop, okay, and bring out the panels here. If you go down to, I think, is it lens corrections? Yeah, lens corrections. Okay, the lens corrections tab. Remove chromatic aberration and enable profile correction. Now, to be honest, I would do both of those almost by default, because why not? Why not remove any chromatic aberrations, and why not enable profile corrections and say what lens you were using? So what lens would you have shot? Yeah, well, that was the Nikon D90 with an 18 to 105. So it's a Nikon. So there we are, Nikon, and it'll, you see, it's made a guess. It said it's guessed at the 10.5, but you can pick the closest lens. So you had the 18 to 105. It's not picking that up from the options, but if you put, say,
it is an old photo. Just remember that it's several years old, so they probably don't make that one anymore.
They don't. But you see, look what happens as I choose these different lenses to the photo. Can you see it's?
Yes, I do.
It's applying slightly different barrel correction. So you might find that one of those looks slightly better than, you know, one of the other ones or whatever, or turn it off completely. So on, off, you can see it's just making a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
And certainly most of the modern lenses will be in the database. And so what I would normally do is, and this is one of the things you can do, if I go back to G, so if you're doing an import, okay, so let's just say I'm going to import some shots, so I'm now an import, yeah. Over here on the apply during import side of the screen, you see there's this develop settings option, yeah. So what you can actually do is you can set up a preset, a user preset. So I have a user preset set up for D810 basic landscape. So when I'm shooting the D810, I have certain settings that I would just, almost as a matter of course, just apply to pretty much every landscape shot that I take. You know, a bit of sharpening, you know, maybe 20% clarity, stuff like that. So rather than having to do that every time I go in, what I can do is I can, if I come out of, let's cancel out of here. So I could come into an image like, you know, like your image. Okay, so I go into develop, and I set up various things, and then I create a preset. So here we are, presets, create a preset. Okay, so I'm going to call this one Sue's Landscape, Sue's Landscapes. Okay, and that's going to go into my user presets. And what I can do is I can then say, okay, so the changes that I've made to this shot, okay, so I've enabled profile corrections, I've enabled chromatic aberration. I don't want to mess with transform because that typically is, you know, per shot. But, you know, maybe my basic exposure or my white clipping or whatever, or my texture or my clarity, I want to save the settings that I used on this image as a preset to then apply on import for other shots. So I choose the settings that I want to save, yeah, and maybe the sharpening and the dehaze I'll put in there as well, something like that, yeah. And now I create that preset. So now we go back to the library module. So go back to G for grid, okay, and we've got our card of images from our next shoot. Okay, so I'm going to import a set of images from a card or from wherever it is, yeah. And what I'm going to do on import is I'm going to choose in the develop settings, down in user presets, I'm now going to find Sue's Landscapes. There it is. There's that preset we just, okay. So that is going to apply chromatic aberration. It's going to apply automatic lens, you know, recognize the lens, and it's going to apply the clarity and the texture, I think were the other two, weren't it, to all the photos as they're imported in. So that saves me having to do that every time. So that can be a real time saver if there's stuff that you typically do on import. So you just create a develop setting, create a preset, and then apply that during import to images coming in. Okay. So I don't know whether you all knew about that, but
you did a Lightroom session with Tim and myself and
Oh, that's a
Toy
while back, isn't it? Yeah.
a long time ago, and you showed us that, but I couldn't. I know it's there, but I didn't know how to do it anymore.
Right. Okay. So has that? Did I just give you enough for you to know how to do that now? So
Yes, you did, and it's on the recording as well. So
it's on the recording as well. So yeah.
I'll be using that for sure.
Super. That's great.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. So we've just still got the four of us, haven't we? Okay. So I'm going to save Sandy's shot until we have a call with Sandy on, because she particularly wanted me to edit her rhino shot. But Akash has sent in a monkey. Okay, so let's have a go at this one next. My normal thing is go straight into crop. So rather than having to click onto the develop module and then click on the crop tool, the shortcut is R for crop. So that takes us straight into develop and opens the crop tool for you. Okay. So the little guy's face is going to definitely be the focal point here. I don't know whether this is a landscape shot or a portrait shot. I'm going to go for a portrait orientation first. So the easiest way to switch the orientation in Lightroom is to hit the X key, and that will just cycle between landscape and portrait, just hitting the X key. So I'm going to go with the X key there. I would tend to go normally with a portrait type, and certainly a portrait of a human or a primate with an 8:10 crop. I like the slightly shorter, stubbier feel of the ratio. So if we go with that 8:10 crop, and then let's see what that gives us, because we want to make the monkey really pretty big in shot. So let's have a look. Maybe let's try that. We can always come back and open it up later on, but let's just play with that for now. But you see now immediately he's come much more prominent in the frame than we had previously. Okay, so subject, background, corners. Well, he's definitely the subject. The background is a bit distracting at the moment because it's much brighter than he is. So the eye is being taken to these areas here. So we're gonna have to try and do something about that background. But let's play with him to start with and see what we can do with him. So I think let's start with just a general radial filter. Now you see what I want to do is I want to do a radial filter that kind of pretty much covers the whole of his body, and I'm stuck at the bottom of the screen here. I can't go any bigger. Okay, but what you can do is you can shrink the image. So up here we can go, instead of 1:1 and this drop arrow here going bigger, we can go back. So we can go 1:3, see, and make it smaller. And that allows you to extend a radial filter outside the boundary of the image and just kind of position it a little bit more, maybe something like that. Now, what I really want to focus this particular radial filter on is the chest and the tummy area. I'm going to do another processing around the eyes, so I'm not too worried that we're on the edge of this radial filter here. In fact, I might just pull it down even more. So just kind of apply it to this area here. So that'll be fine. Let's come back to fit, and now we can just dial that down. So put it back to 0, which is where it started, and now just bring it up and see how much brightness we want to pull out of that fur. Okay, and what are we on? Two stops there. That might be enough, because once we apply texture or clarity, we're going to get a bit more contrast in that fur as well. So definitely look at that. Look at what texture does to that fur. Oh, it's just incredible, the difference that texture makes, and the clarity. Now, what I'm finding is texture is the one to use on fur these days, because clarity will just darken things off. Now that might work, but I don't know. With a young, I think it's a vervet, this one, isn't it? I think we want to keep that beautiful, delicate, tiny fur. There's little matting in there and stuff like that, and clarity is just going to make that too much. So I think we'll just use the texture, but we'll maybe bang that texture all the way up, and then let's see what a little bit of contrast might give us. Yeah, no, I don't think even the contrast. I think what we probably want to do here is just push the highlights just to make that fur pop as much as we can. Maybe the whites as well, because they're not really highlights, they're more midtones. But you see there, if we push the whites, look what's happening to the fur around his chin, and this fur down here. It's just kind of popping out a little bit more. So that's starting to look something like now, I think. Still got to do his face, but we've worked his body quite well so far. There's not a lot you can do about this. I mean, yeah, we could take this into Photoshop and get rid of it, but I think it's beyond cloning effectively in Lightroom. You would need to use things like content-aware fill, and this would be quite a painstaking job to get rid of all this, and you still wouldn't be able to use it in a nature competition. So if you were going to spend that much time on this image, I think you'd want a better image of the monkey doing something more interesting, to be worth investing the time on losing all this stuff, and then only being able to use it in pictorial or open or whatever. Let's play with the eyes. Let's play with the eyes and the face. Again, I'm just going to play here with the face probably to start with, and then pull it down. So immediately you see there, that's just almost at one stop, and then a little bit on the shadow as well. So exposure is bringing out the dark areas of his face, but it's also bringing out a little bit of the fur around his eyes, which we want to do. But then we can accentuate the brightening of the dark skin and the eyes a little bit more using the shadows. So that's fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into 2 or 3 to 1, and that's going to zoom us in, maybe even 4 to 1, because what I want to do now is work the eyes, and then just move this square to here. Now we can deal with noise later on. There's a little bit of noise in this shot. What are we on? We're on this Pentax f11, a 60th of a second. It's an interesting choice of aperture. Akash, are you on?
Yes.
Yeah. Why f11? Because this, you've got not that much light to play with, and if you'd have gone down to f8, f5.6, f4, you could have got another 2 or 3 stops. That would have given you a 60th, 125th, 250th, or even 500th of a second. And you maybe wouldn't have your noise. Yeah, your ISO 200, that's fine. But f11 is a big depth of field that slowed your shutter down a lot.
Yeah, no, this was quite a few years ago while I was learning. Right.
Okay. So that's fine. Okay. So yeah, you would have got a sharper shot because at 1/60th,
Yeah, it's quite slow.
Especially with a 500 mil, Whereas if you'd have knocked that down to f4 or whatever, you'd have been up to a 500th of a second, which would have compensated for it being a 500mm camera. So yeah, okay, that's fine. So I would maybe just play with another radial filter here. Now, you see, I had a radial filter covering the face there. And then I've come away, I've turned that one off, and now I'm coming in and I'm going to do another one. Very often what you find is that some of the radial filters kind of get in the way, or you can see them and this kind of stuff. And these edit pins, sometimes you can if they're getting in the way or they're showing and you don't want them to show, you can just turn that to never. Okay, and now only the one that you're doing now shows up. And particularly when you're doing things like cloning, this can be really, really useful, having those edit pins turned to never, because it means that the clone that you did just before doesn't get in the way of the clone that you want to do next. So that's just to be aware of that. So I would now want to play with the eyes, and typically that when I'm watching kind of, you know, videos of retouches and things and doing eyes, what they tend to do is they tend to use an adjustment brush, and again, you know, use your exposure to see where you're painting. So what you're going to do is you're just going to paint the iris. So you're not going to paint the lids, and you're not going to paint the pupil. You just want to paint the iris. Okay, so I'm going to make the circle a little bit bigger. The right and left square brackets will allow you to make the circle bigger or smaller, you know, or you can obviously do it here like this. And I'm going to turn auto mask off because I just want it to just draw smoothly rather than trying to find edges. So we're just going to draw around the pupil and just cover the whole of that iris of the eye, which is kind of like there. Yeah. Now, obviously, that's way too much, so we'll pull it back, and then we can just brighten that up. And you'll typically, you don't ever want to do this more than about a quarter or a third of a stop. So, you know, 0.25, 0.3, something like that. Yeah, if you go a little bit further, if you go to about 0.3, something like that, yeah, and then use some clarity, okay, because the clarity will darken the eye again. So I generally put about 20 or 25 on clarity and maybe half a stop on brightening. And if we want to see the difference before and after, we go down to the bottom of this tab and this little rocker switch down here. So before, after. See, so it's just going to bring that eye out just that little bit more, okay? And again, we can now select that. We can right-click, duplicate, just like we did before with that radial filter, and just drag that over to the other eye, and you can see it's going to make that, and then just move it across. So we can now see where that is on the other eye, and just apply it to the eye. And normally the eyes are near enough the same kind of that we can see the pupil is about right there. So let's come back out to fit, and let's just turn those eyes off and on, off and on again. Okay. So again, it's just bringing those eyes out a little bit more. Now that might even be just a little bit too much. And if it is too much, you can, again, you've got them, and you can go back in and just dial them down or whatever. But very often when you're looking at them, if you've not seen it before, then that might be, you know, absolutely fine. It's just that you've seen it dark before, and now you're aware of it in a different light, if you like. So, but those eyes are definitely quite piercing now. They're kind of looking at us, and they're not hidden away in the face. So what can we do with these areas? Yeah, let's have a play. Let's see what we can do. So if we select that area there, and we just try and darken it down a little bit. Now, you know, that's going to work to some extent. It's definitely making it less intrusive. Yeah, so that might work. I wonder whether we could do something with this changing the hue as well. I don't know whether this will work or not, because me and color adjustments is not a good place to go. Okay, so that might not be the best way to move things. No, I think we'll leave that. But yeah, the other thing is maybe just desaturate a little bit the color, so that it becomes less, less punchy. You can always, again, declarify, as well, because now there's even less detail to go around. And I might just pull the highlights down as well, just to make those even darker, something like that. So, that kind of an approach, okay, is one that might work for this. And if you want to apply the same thing, again, duplicate it, and then take that up to here, rotate by just grabbing the edge of that radial filter. Okay, so that's there. Now, if we try and apply that to here, we're now darkening off the monkey's head. So let's brush away the application of that darkening off the monkey's head. And the way you do that is you've got the radial filter still live. You go over to brush here. Okay. And what we want to do here now is we want to hold the Alt key down, or the Option key on a Windows machine. So as I hold my Alt or Option key down, you see I can adjust the size of the brush. But you see the center of the brush is now a minus. You see, I'll take my finger off the Alt key, it's a plus. Press the Alt or the Option key, it's a minus. And the minus tells you this is now going to be an eraser. So I'm going to just gently, starting at the very edge of that radial filter, and you see, just brush across the head, and it's just erasing the effects of that radial filter on the monkey. So it's still applied to the area above, but it's now not applied. And if you hover over the center, you'll see when that red appears, it's now just in the area above the monkey's head, because we've brushed it away from this bottom bit of the filter using that Alt brush. Okay. So that's quite a useful. And again, I might just take a duplicate of this one again and pop it down here, just to knock off that bottom bit as well. You could do the same up here, but I think I'd probably just pull in an adjustment in that corner. Just knock that corner down a little bit like this. So that's taking care of the background to a fairly large extent. So what are we happy with? Are we happy with our shot? No, I don't think I'm ever going to be happy with the shot with all this barbed wire in the front. It's just not. It's not doing it for me, and I want a bit more sharp detail and clarity here around the head. So again, double click to turn the exposure off. Let's just see whether we can get a bit more punch out of him. Yeah, a little bit of clarity and maybe even more texture. Look how that hair and is now, really crunched out. So that's really brought his head out. That's now definitely the area that the eye goes to, with the white around the face, taking the eye into the shot. And then the last thing I'd probably do, because we did notice a little bit of noise, was so at the moment the little thumbnail on the right here is picking up his paw. That little crosshairs here, click on that, and then you can decide where you want that that detail to be. So let's just have a look at the eyes there, and maybe just put a little bit of luminance noise reduction in, just to pull that detail out. And again, if we go into say 3:1 or 4:1, where we can see that noise, yeah. As we apply the noise reduction, you can see, so if we have no noise reduction, let's do it all the way to 100, bang, look what it does. You've got, it's horrible now, okay? So you just need to kind of, just enough noise reduction to soften off the crunchiness. Remember, you're at 4:1 here. So then if we go back to fit, that's actually now pretty much leaving you the detail. Any comments? Akash, your shot. Hey, Henry, how are you?
I'm back. Finally have some cover.
Yeah, you guys. Everybody's sitting at the top of my second screen at the moment, so I'm just going to see whether I can move you so I can see you as well.
Okay.
There we are. We've got Jane, we've got Akash and Sue, and Tim, I think, is maybe in the background as well.
Yeah, I think you'll probably get a couple of people trying to join in now because the power has only just come on.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fine. We just started with a couple of shots, and we're recording the session anyway. So if anybody wants to pick the session up and watch it again, and they're fine. Hi, Les. Can see you there in the background. We're all good. We're all good. Thanks. What else to just improve this shot? I think this little thing here is a little bit distracting. So again, depending on what you want to do with this, obviously if it's nature, you can't clone anything out, but I'm going to assume that this isn't going to be put in as nature. So you just kind of adjust your clone. So you've got clone or heal. Let's try heal here. Yeah, and we'll just make it as small as we can to just paint this out and see what it'll do. Okay, there we go. It's gone. And again, if we wanted to get rid of some of these darker patches here, we can just paint them out. And then same again, paint it out. And then move. And maybe that little bit there. Oh, a little bit there. And then you can decide whether this is too much or not. You might take out this one. This is a little bit distracting, isn't it? But some of the others maybe you leave in. And once you go back out to fit, you can't see that anything's been done there. So before, after. So again, it's really taking the eye, isn't it? It's and I mean, if we go right back to the beginning, where we had the crop as well, so that was the before. So there's quite a bit of difference between that and what we ended up with.
Yeah, I liked what you did with the eyes and the fur. When I edited this. When I edited it, didn't have the texture option in Lightroom.
Okay, yeah. So, I don't know what I've done there. Hold on, G for grid. Come back to, yeah, right, okay. Yeah, so that texture option is just so powerful now, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, but like you said, you were learning at the time. F11 wasn't the right aperture for that image. You would be aiming for the smaller numbers rather than the big numbers for that. Would anybody else have done anything differently with that image? No, because I mean, it was a tricky one to edit that in terms of all the stuff at the front. It's yeah, I don't know that you could really use this image because I think this just gets in the way, doesn't it? But,
Yeah, there's too much of stuff around the monkey.
yeah. The Skellens have joined us. Hi, Mike. Hi, Toy. You're on mute, but I think you're with us, even if we can't see you or hear you. So good to see you. Okay. Alrighty. I'm not going to do Sandy's rhinos tonight because she's not here, and I know she wants to do those. So I've just pulled a few other images out just to see what we might do. This is an old one from Paris from years ago, but I thought it might be an interesting one just to show you the transform tool. I don't know whether you know about or use the transform tool much. So D for develop, to take us into the develop mode. We'll just close down the left-hand panel. We don't need it. Typical big building problem, isn't it? You know, you've got the keystoning, you didn't get the verticals right, you're at a funny angle, all this kind of stuff. But Lightroom has a fantastic tool, which is down here in the Transform tab, which can do incredible things with images like this. Now, it's got all these presets, so you can tell it, you know, do your best with an auto, okay? And yeah, it's not doing much at all. Okay, guided. No. Hang on, hiya, you've unmuted and we're getting feedback. I'll mute you. There we are. Yeah, that's fine. Lovely. But we can see you now. Hi, Toy. That's great. Okay. Who else have we got on? Yeah, so we've got, oh yes, you're on twice. I see you've done your normal thing of the phone and the computer. That's great. Lovely. All right, just make this window as big as I can, and then I can see everybody. Right, there we are. Yeah, so the tool that I would normally use when I come down into Transform is this one in the top left-hand corner, okay? These little lines in the top. And these let you draw verticals and horizontal lines and say what's vertical and what's horizontal in the picture, or what do you want to be vertical and horizontal. So let's click in there, and now I've got a cross. So I'm going to pick up the right-hand side of the Arc de Triomphe here, and I'm going to click and drag, and then draw that line down the very right-hand edge of the Arc de Triomphe. And I'm just off the right-hand edge at a millimeter there. So let's keep it off a millimeter down here. Okay, so there's my first vertical. Now you'd need to choose two verticals. Okay, so then obviously in this case, I'm going to choose this one. And again, I'm just off the stone. So there we are. There's the other vertical. Now, as soon as I release my mouse now, it's going to do its magic and make both of those vertical. Okay. But what I also want, and I mean, I could go with that and stuff, but it looks a little bit odd. So I want a horizontal as well. So I'm going to take a horizontal here, and I'm just going to draw a horizontal line across the top there. And now it will give me a horizontal. Okay. So, you know, you've got something which now is approaching, looking as perhaps you wanted it to look when you were taking the shot. The thing to remember is you're always going to lose quite a bit of the image doing these dramatic transformations. So when you're shooting big buildings, shoot much wider than you think you're going to need. Because then if you know you're going to use the transform tool to fix the keystoning or fix the verticals, you know you're going to lose quite a bit of the edge of the picture. So shoot really wide, and then you've got picture edge to lose and still be able to create a decent composition. Okay. So that's just the trick with that transform tool. So, you know, that's the before and then that's the after. But you can see we've lost a good lot of this. We've lost a good lot of sky here. So had I taken my own advice, I would have shot this a lot wider, or maybe even shot a 2 or 3 panorama, and done it so that I would have had more room to play with on the right hand side here. Any thoughts or questions on that? No?
I just want to ask you, do you always want that formal, classical perspective?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, to be honest, with that one, I was just showing it as an example of the tool, if you like. But no, I mean, it certainly doesn't have to be that everything has to be vertical and horizontal. You know, sometimes that your creative vision may be for something different. I think I'm just a little bit OCD that I like verticals to be vertical and horizontals to be horizontal. So, but you know, that's just me. Yeah. Yeah, but if your vision is different, then don't worry about that at all. Yeah, I just wanted to show you that tool, if you like. So right.
If I may ask a question, so if you look at the actual ground level, it seems that the left-hand side now is higher than the right-hand side. Is that just the way it is, or is that caused by the?
No, I think you're right, aren't you? So let's just go in and see if we can in the transform, because you can also draw a second. You can draw a second horizontal, so that would square up. Okay, there you go. So now you apply a crop. Okay, so if you do a constrained crop, then it's gonna do its own constraint. But what you can do is you can apply that, and now you can go into the crop tool. Okay, and you can now play. So you see, we've actually still got room to play. We can move this around, and now you know that's actually a better look, isn't it? So we can keep that foreground car. We can keep in the motorcycle. We've got a bit more space here, and then we can maybe just pull that down a little bit there. Maybe do something like that, and then you'd probably want to drop a fantastic sunset sky in behind it or something to to replace it. Yeah, but yeah. So well spotted, Henry. Yeah, but that second line helped, didn't it? So.
Joe, is that the Etuil?
Sorry, Mike.
Is that the Etuil?
That is the Arc de Triomphe, I think.
I can see it's the Arc de Triomphe. I'm asking, is that circle where everybody goes round at racing speed?
Yes, it is. Yeah, where you take your life into your hands. The Place de la Concorde, isn't it? Yeah, where you take your life into your hands, getting into the middle. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's no lanes or anything. The cars are just whizzing round. It's worse than Milan.
Like Dodgems without rules.
Absolutely, yeah. Super. Now I'm just aware that I need to keep an eye on the time because I need to finish up at 7:15. So we've got another half hour or so, but I haven't got a timer with me. So just keep an eye on the time, everybody. Okay. I have another talk to do after this one. The Hebden Bridge Camera Club in the north of England. So. Right, G for grid. Let's have a look at another one. What else have we got? Oh yeah, this is a shot I took in Wales. In Kerry, Valentia Island, 2 summers ago, I think. So this is the top of the single mountain on Valentia Island, which is off the west coast of Ireland. And this was a sunset from the top of this mountain. This mountain's called Giacorn. So I just saw it in one of the folders and thought that might make an interesting one to edit. see whether we can do something with it. So let's just turn the information off. So I cycles around those information tabs. And let's just go into develop and have a look and see whether there's anything we can do with this. So we had a look at one of Sue's images earlier on, and she'd exposed the original image for the highlights, and that's what I've done here. So when you are faced with a high contrast image like this, where we've got the sun and bright clouds here, it's if you just do general metering, you're going to blow some of the highlights, because it'll try and average everything out, and it'll try and make the darker areas somewhat brighter, and then the brightest areas, some of them will blow out. So what you have to do is you have to expose for the brightest areas and allow the original raw file to, if you like, look too dark. Because you can bring back shadows, but you can't always bring back highlights that have blown. Okay, so it's going to be far easier to rescue this dark foreground and make it look good than it would be to rescue these clouds if we blew them out and we lost all the detail in those clouds. So if we have a look at the histogram here, we can see on the right-hand side, we've got pretty much a perfect exposure. We've just about hit that right-hand edge, which means we've got all the bright tones right up to just in here where we're not quite at pure white. And then we've got all the mid-tones, and then we've got the darker areas here. And we've clipped a little bit of the black. You can see, the little triangles in the top left and right of the histogram. When those go white, yeah, that's showing that you've started to clip. You've started to go outside the boundaries of the dynamic range. So just hovering over that triangle immediately highlights the areas in the shot where we've gone to complete black. Okay, so if I click on that, that'll leave those now showing. Okay, so I clicked on that to fix it, if you like, and that leaves those highlights showing. And now I can go into the basic tab and I can adjust my blacks to the right until those highlights disappear. Okay, and look what's happened to the histogram at the same time. That, you see, so I was there, yeah, and we had that clipping, and as I've moved to the right, it's pulled the very left-hand edge of the histogram slightly to the right, and that triangle is now not clipping, and because all those blue areas of clipping have disappeared. So it's a very easy visual way of seeing where it is that you're trying to work with. Okay, so we know now that we've if you like brought back the full dynamic range of the shot to within our histogram, which means that we can now play with all those tones and use them, you know, to get the image that we want. So what else can we do? Well, I have shadows already up at 100 and highlights down at 100. I think this is a preset that I applied on import a long time ago when I was still learning. So I'm just going to zeroize all the tone images. And the way I just did that, let me just undo that, okay? If you want to set all these back to the center in a particular area, like tone, for instance, you hold the Alt or the Option key down while the mouse is over the title tone. So Alt, you see now it says Reset Tone. And if I click Reset Tone, all these will go back to the middle. Yeah. If I click to Reset Presence, all of them will go back to the middle. I'm just holding the Alt key down. Okay, so that's a very quick way of getting rid of all your adjustments and putting yourself back to zero again, and now starting from scratch. So now I can do my black point, yeah. So you can see where those blacks are. So I'm just going to get rid of the blacks there, yeah. I can do my white point. So let's just move the whites on the right-hand edge until I start to clip, and then just come back a tad. And now I know I've not blown anything in the sky. Now visually, I think that's too bright. It looks to me, if I put that into club, they would pull me up for blown highlights there. So I'm even going to pull those whites back a bit. Even though the histogram tells me I'm okay, I think by eye, I'm going to put it there, something like that, okay? So this is your classic raw file, isn't it? You know, all the information is in there, but we need to process it because otherwise it's flat and it's not a good shot. So let's see what we can do with this image. Okay. Exposure is not going to be a lot of good to us because if I push exposure up, this brighter area in the middle is just going to blow out. So look what happens. Yeah, crazy. So we can't use exposure. We've got to be more selective. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to use a graduated filter. And I'm going to use a graduated filter. Now, I would normally start here and drag up like this, okay? And then you have that kind of not, you know, fairly soft gradation here. But what I want is fairly hard edge. So I'm just going to come down to about there. And then I'm going to pull this up and just stick it on the horizon so that the edge is about there. Okay. Now my horizon line is straight, so that's good. I don't have to do anything. So you can see as you hover over the dot for a second or two, the red shows you where the graduated filter is going to be applied when I actually do stuff with it. So now I'm going to pull back on that exposure until, you know, the exposure is what I want, which is a fair bit actually. I want, you know, that's 0. So we're talking a one stop, maybe 2 stops of exposure, something like that. Maybe, now it is a sunset, so it's supposed to be quite dark, but I want a bit of detail in the foreground. So we'll start with that. And then I'm going to push the shadows a little bit and just see what we can get around the shadows. Now, you see, what I don't want to do, I don't know whether it's a halo or whether it's just a brighter area, but as I push the shadows, and I noticed it in that preset processing before, you see this area here, it looks like a halo around the rock, and I don't like that. And you put that into a competition and they're going to pull you up on it. They're going to say, you've over-processed this, that's a halo. And you should have compensated for it. So I'm not going to use shadows at the moment. And I'm just going to leave the sea kind of like that for now. And that will do for my foreground process. What I might do is a separate process for the sky. So again, come down and just pull the sky down and just select the whole of the sky. Yeah. And what I want to do here is, I want to just maybe just brighten things up a bit, but I don't want it, all I'm trying to do really is just brighten up these really, really dark clouds a bit. So I know I'm blowing my brighter areas at the moment, but I am brightening the clouds as I want them to. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to turn the range mask on and go down to luminance and say, don't apply this exposure brightening to the brightest areas. And I do that by pulling back on the right-hand edge of the luminance range mask. So this edge here, okay? So as I pull this back, you see it's now not applying that brightening to the brightest areas of the shot. They're coming back in. So if I now apply the exposure brightening, you see it's only being applied to those darker areas of the shot. So again, I don't want to lose all my definition. But I want a bit more definition, so I might even just try for some dehaze. the haze is going to darken things, and I don't want to darken things, but I want a bit more clarity in those clouds. So let's maybe see. Yeah, it's an interesting cloudscape. That, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's not working for me. Let's just get rid of it. There we are. I think if I'm going to do anything with this, I'm going to use an adjustment brush and just see whether I can just paint in a little bit of exposure here. Just see whether I can get some stuff going on here. Let's just try that and then pull it back to, yeah. Now just that half a stop just brings out that cloud a little bit more. That it's too dark as it is, so I'll just paint that in, just bring that out just that little bit more. I think that's a more sympathetic look to those clouds. So just apply that there. Okay, so that's that. So now I want to work on this rock, because this rock's got lots of potential, and this rock is a lovely foreground. So come out of my adjustment brush. I think I'm going to use an adjustment brush for the rock. So what I want to do is I want to put on auto mask, check the feather and flow, everything's up at 100, that's fine. And I just want to really select this rock. So I just want to paint around the rock. And if I'm careful, and just don't go too close to the edges, there's enough contrast between the rock and the sea for the edge detection to pretty much work, and just allow me to select that rock. So what you generally do is you select the edges like this, okay, and so now I've got most of the rock, and now I can make that brush bigger, and I can paint in the rest because I've already done the edges. So it just saves a little bit of time. Okay, just paint that all in. And then maybe I don't want this grass that I've done. So Alt takes me to the eraser brush, and then make it bigger or smaller, so relatively small, and just brush out where I'm going to apply that mask to. So I don't want it against that grass. So there we are. So it's just the rock that I'm going to be working on now. And now I can pull the exposure down on the rock and bring it up. Okay, so I'm certainly going to want to bring that brightness up on the rock a little bit, but I'm certainly going to want texture or clarity, and maybe both. So let's see what texture gives me. Look at the difference there between that and that. Okay? And clarity as well is going to work on that rock, and it's going to give it that kind of really, really old, wet kind of, I don't know. That's what I want. I want that look. I want that detail and that contrast look. So maybe push the whites. You see, if you push the whites in the rock, it's really going to bring out all that contrast. Now, if you overdo it in a sunset shot, it's going to look absolutely mad. So that's probably enough. And while I've got the rock selected with this adjustment brush, I just want to make sure that I'm not going to get any halos. So Alt, make it nice and small. I'm just going to go around the edge and just make sure that I'm not dropping into the sea there. Okay, because if I get those halos, that's gonna really spoil the effect. So there we are. So there's my rock. Now I might do the same. I might do another. You never paint everything with the same adjustment brush. Use different adjustment brushes, and then you can adjust them separately. So now I'm going to adjust the grass. So again, paint on the grass. Here we go. And then maybe make it a bit smaller. And paint in the edges of the grass here. down here. And I know I've gone over, but I can just use the Alt and then rub out. So Alt for the minus, and now just take off those halos. Okay. If you have one of the tab, you know, the graphics tablets with a pen, this kind of stuff is so much easier. I'm just on the laptop tonight, so I'm not using that. But if you can do this with a pen tool on one of those graphics tablets, it makes this stuff a lot easier. That would be enough, and then we're going to just pull that down to just to bring it up enough that we can see a little bit of the grass. You see, and it's just catching that light. You see that there. Okay. Right. Next thing is the sun. So, big oval radial filter. Okay. Flat to the sky. So I'm gonna just pull it in like this. Okay. What I'm looking for here is, I'm going to double click on exposure to zeroize it. Okay. What I want to do is I just want to warm that up a little bit. So you see I'll go too far. Okay, so there you see I've really warmed it up. And as you hover over that radial filter, you can see where it's being applied, the extra warmth, if you like. Now, again, I can make it bigger into the sky like this, and then just rub the warmth out just here. So again, go to brush, grow that brush, and just rub the application of that warm color off the rock. You see, and then it's, yeah, I've gone too far, so I need to add it back in just there, and you can see where it's adding in. So this, you have to do this carefully. You have to kind of take your time and get this right, especially if you're going to put this into a competition. But I'm just showing you the tools so that you can do it. But it just accentuates the warmth, and maybe, you know, we could even make that sun, the center of that sun, a little bit brighter, just to give a even more punch on it. Too much, and yeah, I've gone too far with the whites because my histogram is now blowing out. So let's just pull it back. There we are, something like that. That might do. And then I would probably just to pull the eye in even more, I'd just probably put about a 20% vignette on 14, 15, something like that. Maybe just a little bit of a vignette. So that's, let's do it. So that was our before, isn't it? With our clipping. Turn the clipping off if we can. And there's where we've got to. Yeah, I'm still not really happy with it. I'm going to just try a crop. I'm just going to try a panoramic crop. So maybe a 16 by 9. No, there's not a huge amount of great detail in that sky. The rock is nice. I don't really want to lose too much of the rock. What about a 3 by 1? That's 2. Yeah, that's too much. 2 by 1. Does a 2 by 1 give us? Yeah, all right. You know, it's odd because the horizon line's right in the middle. maybe sacrifice a little bit of the rock and just put a little bit more of the sky in. Again, just play with the crops and see. I like the bigness of the sky though. You know, if we come in and use the thirds line to put the sun on the third or whatever, it just gets small. And I like the size of the sky. And I suppose I was standing on the top of the mountain and just seeing the whole of the Atlantic in front of me. So there's a memory there as well. But I think, yeah, I think that's probably what I would do with that shot. Anybody got any other thoughts on that shot? Any other ways that they would approach it? No? Okay. All right. Have I shown you guys compositing light trails before?
Yeah.
Yes or no, Henry?
No.
Right. Okay.
It's 8:05 at the moment, Joe, so you have 10 minutes.
Right. So 10 minutes. That's fine. That's just perfect. Okay. So we are going to take these 6 light trail shots that you can see up on the screen there. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, as I move through these, you can see I'm on a tripod because the buildings behind me are not moving. Okay, so they're fixed. So these are, what are these? 6.5 second exposures, I think, something like that. 5 second exposures. Okay, shot with a little Fuji, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those 6 shots. So G for grid. So click on the first one, go to the last one, shift and click. So I've selected all 6. Okay. Now I'm going to go up to, hold on, you guys are in the way. Let me move you onto my second screen. There we are. So now I'm going to go up to photo, edit in, and I'm going to open these as layers in Photoshop. You don't just edit in Photoshop, you've got to go to open as layers. If you just edit them in Photoshop, it'll open them as 6 separate images. Whereas if you open them as layers in Photoshop, and this is going to take a minute or 2 to do now, so we'll have to wait for Photoshop to fire up and make the copies and load them up. This will load them into one image as a stacked set of 6 layers, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to align them to make sure that, you know, even if there was a little bit of tripod movement or whatever, we don't get that. And then we're going to use a blending mode, which will allow the light trails to show through the layers and give us a composite, which is just one image. So Photoshop is just firing up now. And I'll bring that down onto my other screen once it's ready to come. So we just now have to wait for it to make its copies and finish loading. Photoshop is not moving until it's finished its thing. So just bear with me for a second. I'll stop sharing Lightroom. I'm going to bring Photoshop. Come on. It's still processing. This is what happens when you've got big raw files and you want to process 6 at a time. Okay, right, so I can drag Photoshop onto my main desktop here and share it with you. Share Photoshop. Can you see Photoshop now?
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so what we have is we have one tab in Photoshop, and on the right-hand side here, you can see the 6 images as 6 layers down on the right. And at the moment, they're like prints, sat one on top of another. So the only print you can see is the one on the top. Okay, so if I turn off the top print using that little eye there, you see we've got the one underneath. And if I turn that one off, you can see the one below it. So I can go all the way down the stack. There's the bottom one. If I turn that one off, nothing. Okay, so we'll turn them all back on again. Okay. So now what I need to do is select the top one, which I've got, then shift and click on the bottom one to make sure I've got all 6 selected. Go up to Edit, and then Auto Align Layers. Okay, and what this will do is just say OK. And what this will do is it will check the photo, and anything that didn't move in the photo, it will make sure that that is pixel by pixel absolutely aligned. Okay, so the only stuff that differs between the photos is the stuff that's moving, and it kind of ignores that in terms of aligning the photos. You know, the buses and cars were going past, even when you're on a tripod, you see that. You see, look, can you see that little white line at the top there?
Yep.
Now, that's showing that there's a couple of pixels movement between some of those shots, even though I was on a tripod. Okay, so now there's no movement. Those shots are absolutely perfectly aligned. So now I go back to my images, my layers, and select them again. And this is where the magic happens. Okay, so up here where we have the blending layers, the blending modes, it says normal. So we click on the down arrow, and we want the lighten blending mode. And the lighten blending mode says to each image, if you like, let any pixels below you that are lighter than you as a pixel float up to the top. Okay, so if you think about it, what we've got is light trails in the shots below us, which are brighter than the pixels of this shot in some of the places. So all those light trails, if you like, are going to bubble through and up into the top image. So if I click on lighten, all of a sudden we see all the light trails. Yeah, so there's normal, and there's lighten. So I click on lighten. So now we've got, if you like, what we've done now is we've like turned all those prints into like acetates, and we're seeing all the light trails through from all the prints. Okay, and we can turn on and off each of the images. So you see, if I turn the bottom image off and on, we can see what that is contributing to the image as a whole. So we can go and see, right, yeah, so I definitely want that bit because that's great. What about this one? Now you see this one, it's not really adding an awful lot. In fact, it's adding a heavy line here, which I'm not, you know, I don't really need. It's also adding this mess up here. So this, is it this one? No, it's not, it's this one. You see, I actually don't want that image. That's not really adding anything to this image. So I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to drag that down to the bin. So we now only have 5 shots to play with. Okay, so I'm deleting that layer. I've just got to select the one layer. There we are. Delete that layer. So that frees up some memory. So we can check and we can see what each of these images is contributing. So let's say that I'm happy with that image. Okay. So I am going to now select the 5 again, and then I'm going to do Command and E. I can also go up to image, what is it, layers, I think. Yeah, and merge layers, merge or flatten the layers. They do the same thing, okay? Command and E. And what that does is it now combines those, squeezes them all down into one image. If you don't do that, when you hit save, it saves an image which is the size of 5 raw files. But because I flattened the image, it'll now save the image as a single raw file. Okay, so now when I hit save, it's going to make this new raw file and drop it back into Lightroom for me. So File, Save. Okay, so that's now saving down at the bottom there. Yeah, and I can take that away, and I can stop the share and come back into Lightroom and share Lightroom. Share screen, Lightroom Classic, and whoop, and sure enough, there in Lightroom, we have our new image. Yeah, the one on the top left. There it is. So here's our original images. And then if I go back to G, there's our edited image. So, and now what all we've got to do is we've got to play with this and edit this up into something that will be, you know, worthwhile. So let's go into D for develop and R for crop. And I'll just open up my left-hand panel so that you can see it. I'm going to go for a 16:9 crop. I'm going to turn off my clipping there. So I want everything. So what I'm looking for, ideally, is I want the lines of the traffic to come right into this bottom left-hand corner. So that's just about perfect, that crop there. Yeah, if it was a deeper crop, you know, if I was cropping it free and it was, you know, there, say, it's not as effective. So basically I want that big heavy line to just come into that bottom corner there. Okay. I just want to pull it in a little bit just so that because we had that little distortion, didn't we? So let's just pull in just a couple of pixels to make sure we're good everywhere else. That's fine. I might even, I don't know, how high are those buildings? You can get away with a little bit more. Yeah, just pull it down a little bit more. So that's going to be my crop. Now, let's cool it down. Okay. And if you cool it down, we start to get better colors because it's very, very orange at the moment. So that might be too far, but maybe something like that. Yeah. And now clarity. Right. Look what clarity does. It really brings up the detail of the gravel and of the lines and the color and the detail of the buildings as well. Okay. Now I've got a bit of keystoning. These buildings are leaning out a little bit, so I'm going to pop down to transform and I'm going to draw a couple of verticals. So I'm going to draw that vertical there, and I'm going to draw a vertical here on that building. Okay, and that sorts the verticals out for me. There we go. And now we just see whether we want to play with anything else. So maybe a little bit of sharpening. Come back and try a bit of texture as well, because that fine detail just works so well. And then, yeah, that might be it. That might be it. Use the vibrance just to pull those oranges out a bit more. Something like that. Yeah, there we go. So there is our final image. So we've gone from, you know, these images to a composite of those images with a bit of processing that looks like this once it there. Okay. Very easy to do. Now,
sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
When you took that back into Lightroom, did you save it? Does it automatically save back as a TIFF, or did you have it as a...
No, it saved. It just saved it back as a PSD. So,
okay, as a PSD. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
You can tell Photoshop whether you want it to save back as a PSD or as a TIFF. So I just have it defaulting to PSD.
Sorry, where do you do that?
In the export or the set. If I think it's in the preferences, and you can set it up, or you can do a save as, and then it gives you the options rather than just do a save. So if you set it up in the preferences as your preference, then when you hit save, it'll just use a PSD, or you can go into the preferences as part of the save dialog if you use save as rather than save.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks very much.
No problem. So yeah, so that's how to do a composite. Now, I would never put that one into Club because on the night that I shot these images, yeah, I was focusing more on getting the light trails, and I forgot that these very, very bright areas around the Londish shop front here are blown out. So I went back a week later and I set the camera up again and I shot the same sequence again, but the first image I consciously underexposed by 4 stops. Yeah, and that 4-stop underexposure, everything else in the picture was black pretty much, but those very, very bright areas just here on the right there were perfectly exposed. And then I just brought those in as one of the layers, yeah, and just made sure that I just masked those in into the final image so that I had a perfect exposure then for Club. And that worked really, really well. So here we are, 7:20, and I have to go and now talk to Hebden Bridge Camera Club in North England in 20 minutes. So I'm just going to go and kiss the kids good night and get a glass of water. So if it's okay, we will call it a night, and I will cut this video over the next day or two and send Akash the link so he can put it up. So I hope that was useful tonight. I know it's a slightly shorter session than normal. But,
yeah, very much, very informative, Joe. I really appreciate that.
No worries.
I must apologize on behalf of the rest of the guys that couldn't make it. Because
look, yeah, no problem. I mean, you know, it's obviously, you're fighting the ESCOM overlords, aren't you? So there's not a lot you can do there.
If I may just ask for the next session, if we may, having looked at your book and all that, and the way you process street photography in particular, but in monochrome,
yeah,
if maybe we could ask some of the members to submit something that you could show us how you would tweak it and turn it into a monochrome.
Love
image.
to. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do a mono night. Yeah. And maybe, yeah, let's see whether everybody can submit some images, you know, a couple of days ahead next time. That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Good.
All righty.
Thank you.
I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time for the next judging. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
very
Akash.
much.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.